speaker's presentation, we'll open it up to Q&A. With that, I'll turn it over to Assistant Commissioner Cecil. Thank you again for joining us.
Thank you, Karen, and good afternoon to all of you. We do want to make this largely a Q&A opportunity, but we just thought we'd level set for a moment, get everybody on the same page. So as you're aware, we had a significant wildfire season this past fall, which is a little atypical for us. That was in part enhanced by drought conditions, certainly significant dryness. We went into December and January and it settled a little bit, but then as we got into February and now March, we're seeing an increased number of wildfires. Corresponding with that, the governor hosted a forest fire roundtable at the Forest Fire Service's Quill Air Base on the 13th of February with local governments to have a discussion about these challenges and what the Forest Fire Service is seeing and what local governments have experienced. And then the governor did include in his budget ask for this coming fiscal year $1 million funding allocation for the Forest Fire Service. So we just wanted to give a nod to that. I am going to hand it over to our chief, who's going to talk about kind of the current conditions, what we saw this past weekend. And then the Administrator for Forest and Natural Lands, Greg McLaughlin, will talk about our preparedness measures, particularly the New Jersey Wildfire SMART program. And then, as Karen mentioned, Steve Domber, the state geologist, will round us out with some water supply condition details. So thank you all for joining us, and over to you, Chief.
All right, thanks, John. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Again, Bill Donnelly, Chief of the New Jersey Forest Fire Service. Just a little update as to where we stand this time. This year, this time. Everybody knows we were crazy busy in the fall, coming off of probably one of the busiest falls that I can recall. Numbers were off the chart as far as our indices and things like that. And took a little break over winter. Basically, it gets dark, it gets cold and things like that, but we never really got the precip necessary to where we come into this time of year where things start out slow. We had a warm day Saturday, just as an example, and things went crazy. This year as a whole, like I said, we're continuing just where we left off last year. Since January 1st of this year to date today, we're roughly 4 times the number of fires we had this time last year, which pretty significant, if you ask me, which again leads me to believe we're just stepping into where we left off this time last year. Our acreage, however, though, phenomenally up. I mean, we're way above the acreage we had this time last year. Last year, due to wildfires, we had burned roughly 21 acres. Again, starting off slow last year. This year, we're up over 420 acres of forest burned. So not sure what the rest of the year is going to hold for us. We're taking the necessary steps so that we can be prepared to deal with whatever comes our way. But if things continue the way they are, we're going to, we're going to have quite a fire season on our hands if things hold out the way they've been. But right now, we're seeing a significant uptick this year compared to last year this time. And again, it seems like we're just continuing. Folks got a little break going through the holidays, but, January 1, we started off busy again. And here we are 2 months into, just finishing our second month here. And numbers are astronomical with the amount of fires we had and the amount of acreage we've burned. Greg, I think if you're interested, you might be up. There you go.
Okay, Bill and John, thank you. And thank you again for all of you that are attending. And as you have done in the past, to help us to get the message out. We met in a roundtable format with the governor at Coyle Field, which is our aviation facility, located in Woodland Township, Burlington County on Route 72. That was back on February 13th. And we delivered a message about our new initiative, NJ Wildfire SMART. As you may have seen in the press release, SMART is an acronym that stands for Safety, Mitigation, Awareness, Response, and Training. These are all things that the Forest Fire Service Agency does on a daily, weekly, annual basis. This initiative really looks a little deeper into how we support each of those areas individually and together, how they're interconnected, because they are interconnected. And it's the importance of that interconnection of all of these things that makes the agency successful in doing the job of protecting the residents, protecting the staff, and keeping wildfires basically in check and contained as much as possible. So this is a really deeper dive into what the agency has been doing, does, and wants to continue to do. And to support that, we're honored and thankful that the governor, as a result, and after that meeting, is committing to infuse some additional dollars into our budget going forward. When we look at safety, we do take into consideration our firefighters, especially during these long, extended, busy periods where they're working long hours, days that are connected and become weeks, and weeks that are connected, and it just seems to go on and on. And so we're looking at ways to relieve some of their stress related to the constant response. We've been moving resources around from other divisions. I mean, this excessive and incessant fire frequency and intensity, it's all hands on deck, right? So in my role, coming from former chief of the Forest Fire Service and now administrator of Forest and Natural Lands, that includes the Forest Fire Service, the Forest Service, and Office of Natural Lands Management. So that gives me the ability to pull resources from those other programs to support Forest Fire Service, while Bill manages all the resources within Forest Fire Service and pulls resources from around the state. For example, the Jennings Creek fire up in the northern part of the state on the New York border. Back in the fall, there were resources from as far away as Cape May and Cumberland County supporting that effort, where we've taken measures to make sure people are well fed, that they have all the supplies, resources, amenities. If we have to, people are, given housing and the ability to stay over, so they're not making long drives back to their home base when they are out of their region. And just working with our partners locally more, our local OEMs, our state police OEM, our Department of Transportation. You've seen we have electronic message boards out. So just letting the public know what's going on, and in order to keep them safe as well. Saturday afternoon, evening, we had the fire in Hopewell, Mercer County, and within an hour we had Facebook, website, both ours and local stuff out, working with the OEM. So just really looking at ways to get the messaging out to keep people safe. We talk about mitigation. We haven't had an opportunity yet this year really to get into our what may be termed or known as control burning, what we call prescribed burning season. And there's a little bit difference in distinction of terminology there, which we can talk about later. But that's our best, most effective and efficient and safest tool for reducing fuels and preventing wildfires, and also helping us manage wildfires when they do happen, right? So we plan these prescribed burns strategically based on not only fuel loading, vegetation density, but fire history as well. The other method that we use, we take, for example, down in Bass River Township, where we've been doing some mechanical fuels treatment, where we'll go in and we'll thin the forest. That's our Allen Road Fire and Fuel Break project. So we create fire breaks along roads and natural barriers like streams, but then we look further beyond that into these large contiguous tracts of forest, and we see how we can manage them essentially to reduce the density of trees, make the forest healthier in that regard, but then also interrupt the connectivity of the vegetation. So when a fire does occur, it doesn't spread as intensely and as quickly. For our awareness component, we all have heard before, 99% of wildfires are human caused. We don't necessarily go into the accidental or intentional part there, but we know that 99% are human caused. So we have a really robust prevention program, which includes the Smokey Bear icon. We go to schools, we go to workshops, we go to different events. We're constantly infusing new energy into that program, whether that's increasing the number of actual programs that we attend and or producing more literature in that regard. And we do that here in state, and we work with our other local state partners, Maryland, Delaware, Pennsylvania, to even create a broader regional message in that regard. Response is still one of the best methods used across the country, which is a combination of towers that detect the fires quickly and then dispatch our resources to get to the fire, pinpoint the location so they can find it and get to it quickly. And as you know, our vehicles are built specially to be able to go off-road, go into the woods, and therefore keep most fires small. Roughly 75% of all wildfires in New Jersey are under 5 acres. You have conditions like this weekend where it's been dry and windy, and some of these fires just spread too rapidly to be kept small, but most are kept small. And then, you know, ever as important is our training, which we'll do in-house. We'll send our people out of state, whether that's to New York Fire Academy in Long Island, whether that's to other states like California. And then we train with the locals. So we'll do drills and exercises that are mock, essentially, of what happens when a wildfire occurs, who takes what role, and how do we do, you know, what we're responsible for doing. And that could be things like road closures, evacuations. So a lot of preparedness, a lot of things come under the term preparedness. And, you know, we're continuing to be very responsive. So thank you. And that is my lead for you, Steve. I dropped a little bit about the continued dry conditions.
Thanks, Greg. Thanks, everyone. So I just want to touch briefly upon the water supply conditions experienced around the state. We had a very dry fall, as we know. The state declared a drought warning in November of last year. We remain in that warning as of today. Our conditions or indicators or regional drinking water supply indicators have shown modest minor improvement and still remain relatively dry. Our reservoirs also, our water supply reservoirs have shown some increase, but they haven't returned to normal yet. We still have time before our June 1st sort of rule of thumb that we'd like to be full by June 1st. So we still have time to recover before then, but they still remain below average. And so we anticipate staying in a water supply drought condition, a drought warning for the next several weeks. We meet internally weekly to discuss conditions. We meet with our purveyors every week to talk about issues with them and their conditions and demands. And so we're monitoring closely, and we've seen improvement, minor improvements, but have not seen enough improvement to leave the drought, to go back to normal. So remain in a drought warning, and anticipate we'll stay there for the next several weeks at least until we meet again to make a decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve, Greg, Bill, and John. Before we move to Q&A, we do have a couple of questions in the chat to clarify some points early on in the discussion. Jimmy, do you want to address those before we move to Q&A, or do you want me to hold those until after?
Yeah, and I can put all this in the chat too. Sorry if it's a little echoey where I am. So the most up-to-date numbers on fires for this year, meaning January 1st to March 3rd, we've had 215 wildfires, which have burned 514.25 acres. And then if we're looking at last year, at that same time period, January 1st to March 3rd, we had 69 wildfires, which had burned 21.5 acres.
And can we clarify a little bit? Bill, you had made a comment, 21 acres total burned in which year, and 420 forest acres burned last year. Looking for a little clarification on that.
No, I see Jimmy actually probably just looked at the our information. I got this information this morning. So yes, This time last year, 24, on March 3rd, 2024, we had 67, well, this morning 67, 69 fires and for a total of 21 acres. This year, today, March 3rd, 2025, we've had 214 fires with 514 acres burned. So you can see there's a substantial difference between where we were this time last year and where we stand today.
Thanks,
That clear it
Bill.
up?
I believe it does. With that, we'll move to Q&A, and as some of our media partners have already done, they're using their raise your hand function. So we'll call on people in which their hands are raised in that order. We'll start with Wayne Parry from the Press of Atlantic City.
Hi, folks. How are you doing today? Can you just give me a kind of a report card today? What is actually currently burning right now statewide?
Well, right at the moment, I'm unsure if there's anything real active going on. I know there's probably been 4 or 5 fires today. Nothing that's been earth-shattering, if you will, but our folks, I know for a fact, have been responding to fires all day. I left down the Atlantic County area heading up here today, and I probably heard 5 or 6 fires that were in the process of burning. As far as any of them being substantial, I think our folks got a good handle on them. And but this time of year, you know, when it's dry like this, there's fires every day. There are fires every day, sometimes 2, 3. I think this weekend there was almost 50 fires in a day. So depending on the weather and things like that, not all of them are obviously going to be newsworthy, but you know, there's fires going on throughout New Jersey every day when you have weather like this. So I don't think there's anything substantial other than the fire that's actually occurring in northern New Jersey, Hopewell Township, that folks started dealing with on Saturday afternoon. I know we have crews up there. That fire, I'm not sure what the total acreage on, it was probably somewhere around 300 acres, and we'll have staffing till we get some precip. Again, it's dry up there, so we have some turf conditions, we have some trees that are falling. So folks are up there monitoring and mopping up that fire until they're sure that it's not going to pose us a problem going forward.
Thanks, Bill. Michael Saul Warren with New Jersey Spotlight.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up quickly on that. It looked like over the weekend there were 3 fires of note that were reported on. One was Hopewell, then there was one in Pennsville, and then I saw one in Gloucester Township. Would you guys be able to provide more up-to-date acreage and containment figures for those?
We can. I think I don't have access to that information right now based on them on my computer, but I'm sure we can get it for you and
I'll be able
make it
to
available.
send it.
You can
I'll
get
be
it,
able to
Jimmy?
put it in the
Okay,
chat
Jimmy
here,
can look
yeah.
it up. Yeah, I know the Pennsville fire was out in the middle of the Phragmites and meadows down there. So today we sent some folks down, our GIS folks went down there and actually gridded it and should have a more accurate acreage. The Hopewell fire wasn't completely contained, so I know they were having some stuff fall across the line. They were getting into a couple fields. They were trying to deal with that. So unless that fire's 100% contained, which I'm not sure one way or another yet, that's probably going to be somewhere around 300 acres.
Bill, we did just get an update on that during this call.
Okay.
So 293 acres in Hopewell at 90% containment.
Wow, perfect. So there's that. And then the Gloucester fire, the one that was in Camden County, Gloucester Township. Last I had heard, it was roughly 40 acres. That was a grass fire that burned through a solar field. I know that one's 100% contained. I don't know if they did anything with the acreage, but realistically, I think that was 40 acres. That was the one where you saw it coming up behind the people's houses there. Yeah, nighttime fire. I think they were out there 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning dealing with that.
Nikki Dementri from CBS 3 Philadelphia.
Hi guys, 2 quick questions. The first question, down that Pennsville fire, can you guys elaborate at all? We were told over the weekend it was suspicious. Is there any other determination for cause down there? And then the second question is, I mean, we're sitting here in Mercer County right now. It's not typical to see fires, especially fires this large here in Mercer County. Can you provide any insight in seeing fires in places we normally don't see fires?
Well, we'll go back to the Pennsville fire. That fire, we are following some leads. It is a suspicious fire. We got some intel that we're following up on. And once we figure out if it is in fact true, I'm sure everybody will be brought up to date as to what actually occurred down there. But right now, that fire is under investigation, and we're just following up on some leads. And you're right. 10 miles outside Trenton, you don't typically see these type of wildland fires. But, again, that was a warm day. Where ingredients started to come together. When you start to get these temperatures up around 60 degrees and you get the lower humidities and you get wind-driven fires, this is what's going to happen. They're hard to catch. That fire started as a result of an electric line that came down, started on the side of a road on an embankment full of grass. Fire raced up that grass hill and just continued to spread out, slopped over into the forest on a couple of drainages that dropped down, made its way down, and then raced back up the other side of the hills. Right. Very, very unusual for this time of year, especially when you start to get, above the Trenton area. Not so much maybe down south, the Pine Barrens. They're always going on fire, and you're going to chase them, and you just know that something's going to happen there. But that one there, yeah, that was definitely unusual for this time of year. But again, you got the weather. That wind, as dry as we've been, they weren't covered in snow. This is what happens when you have these type of ingredients come together.
But think about, just to add to that, Nikki and everybody, well, the question could be why? Why is that happening? And if you look at, that Piedmont, Central Jersey area, where the soils have a little bit more clay and silt and loam in them as compared to the Pinelands region, which is sandy and dries out quickly. Those soils in the central part of the state, they're not holding the moisture that they normally would. In a normal year when we've had enough rainfall. And you also look at the forest conditions where you have a significant amount of dead and dying trees, particularly ash, which is very commonly found growing in those forests. And a lot of that ash is died from emerald ash borer. And when it does die, it becomes almost like paper. Essentially falls apart and deteriorates very quickly, but it stays standing. And that contributes to ember spread in those conditions. And so then you have hardwood forest that in effect is acting more like a pine forest of South Jersey. So there's some factors here that are in play and that have been going on over time. It's sort of similar to what we see with oak dying in the more northern and mountainous part of the state from spongy moth, right? Oak doesn't, when it dies and stays standing, it doesn't deteriorate down to more of a paper-like material like ash does, but it still can ignite easier and send embers, which start new fires. I mean, some of the ember travel that we saw from the Pennsville fire was up to 25 miles. So, these are new factors that we're experiencing in addition to the circumstances of weather and humidity and wind and temperature.
Ted Greenberg, NBC 10 Philadelphia.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for having this opportunity. Two quick questions. Any injuries reported in any of the fires from this weekend? And two, can you sum up specifically, if possible, the nearly $1 million increase in funding for the Forest Fire Service in the budget proposal? What will that allow the agency to do?
Bill, you want to take the first part?
Sure. As far as I know, there have been no injuries reported to us from any of the fires that occurred over the weekend. So, not aware of any injuries. That's that.
Yeah, thankfully. And Bill, you can add to this I just want to get started. In terms of the $1 million, right? So the governor has proposed that in his budget, still has to go through the legislature and then come back to him for signature. This would build on a prior $3 million investment that the governor and legislature made last year. And, we're continuing to look at filling out staffing vacancies that exist within the Forest Fire Service, equipment needs within the Forest Fire Service. So we're working through that process now. Not a lot of detail to share and, pending confirmation of that funding, but, certainly would be greatly welcomed to continue to support all the needs of the Forest Fire Service, from staff through to equipment. As I think many of you are aware, the New Jersey Forest Fire Service builds many of their own trucks. They have an air fleet to maintain, staff and towers, section wardens. So there are a lot of needs across the board every year, regardless. And then, all of that gets taxed in these busy fire seasons. But Bill, anything to add to that?
No, like the assistant commissioner said there, we certainly have a wish list. We know that all this is pending a vote, and that, we won't see any of this money till July. Not sure where we're going to stand come July. Right now, we're busy, so we're not real sure where we're going to have to funnel that money to continue at least through next year. But we do have, our wish list includes employees, equipment, and money to run our operations. Everything's going up, from the fuel that we put in our trucks. Luckily, we're not running eggs in our trucks. We're just, running gas, but things are getting expensive. So the cost just to manage the agency, we have those costs that have increased. Equipment costs have gone up, and we certainly have some positions that we'd like to backfill with some full-time employees. So we got big plans, and the money's certainly much appreciated. Confirm that we're going to get it, and then I guess we'll go from there, figure out exactly where our priorities are and what takes precedence.
Frank Kummer with the Philadelphia Inquirer.
Yeah, hi. Thanks for taking my question. So I have two quick questions. I'll try it again, or maybe one is a little longer than the other. But last time this year, we had a relatively wet winter and no drought at the start of the fire season, and it was still a pretty bad season. But this year we're going into what is typically the windiest month of the year, amid a drought where some counties were already down 8 inches of precipitation over the last 365 days or past year or so. Can you speak to how concerning the conditions are right now at the start of the wildfire season? And the second, I would just ask, last year you were citing the Keach-Byram Drought Index and how dry the soil was. Can you tell me how dry it is now, or can you say what the index is at now? Thanks.
Well, like you said, we're extremely dry now. A lot of our fires occur in areas where, you can't go too far in New Jersey without running into a swamp somewhere. And lots of that time we use those swamps to our benefit to slow fires down or keep them in check till we could get around to the other side, or maybe build a control line in the area so to keep the fires smaller. Those swamps and spungs that we're used to dealing with have all but just about gone away. That's one of the biggest obstacles we found with the Forest Fire Service as far as how dry it is. Each day is a little bit different in New Jersey. The top of the forest floor and the trees and things like that, they only get so dry for us. Bad fire days are just that, bad fire days. There's a lot more than the dryness that goes into it. The dryness certainly is an issue for us, but more so it becomes the humidity, where the fire's at, what type of winds the folks are dealing with. A lot of that dictates what makes a fire burn so sporadically. How dry it is certainly prevents us from maybe doing things that we would do when we have water in certain areas laying that we can use to our benefit. But again, our folks are out there, they're looking, keeping an eye on the areas they're responsible for, and they're well aware of what they're faced with in the event that fires do start in these certain areas. Talking with some of our folks, the Batstow River, not that it was a whole lot of river, but it was an area that we could use in the past out there in Wharton State Forest. And we're to the point now you can walk across it without getting your feet wet. So, guys have to reevaluate their game plans and figure out, we get a fire in this area, what's plan B now? Lots of times we're just starting off with plan B, because things that we would typically do this time of year when there's a lot of water in the forest just isn't available to us.
Thank you.
Looking at the dashboard here, I see some hands up, so I'm not sure if these are follow-up questions. Okay, Michael, go ahead. Michael Saul-Warren from Spotlight.
Thanks. Yeah, I wanted to let everybody else go before I had some of my follow-ups.
Thank you.
Going back, Bill and Greg, to the controlled burn, you guys mentioned that because of conditions through the winter and into the spring, you guys haven't been able to burn as much as you were hoping. Can you talk a bit about that and what the impact might be as we get into the more active time of the year?
Well, again, that's that dryness we were talking about. And sorry I didn't mention the Keach Byram. I don't actually have those numbers to give you, but again, I'm sure Jimmy can check in on that there and see where we stand. But prescribed fire is one of the most important tools we have, and we do it based on a priority basis of where, strategically we feel we're going to get our best bang for our buck. We do that so that in the area, especially out in some of these bigger parcels of forest, we'll do some burning so that if a large fire were to come into that area, basically it run into that and it gives us the opportunity to catch it. This time of year, unlike years of the past, things are really dry. So we're starting to get that fire to burn down into the ground, into that duff layer, and create smoke and different things like that. We don't want our fires to be a nuisance. We understand they're an inconvenience occasionally because, there's smoke in the air and things like that. But with as dry as it is, we're just afraid some of these forests are going to become a nuisance because of the smoke that's just going to linger and stay. We don't have the ability to get in there and put them out. Not to mention we start getting these fires into some of these root systems and stuff because it's so dry, and now there's going to be some mortality with the forest. So folks are just being really careful where they're burning, and if it allows and we think it can be done safely, we're going to burn it. But if it's not, we don't want to burn anything that's going to cause anybody, extra aggravation, if you will, or do any damage to the forest. And right now, as you can see, the guys are really busy as well. So maybe it's just, one hand's looking out for the other at this point here, because running all these fires, and burning, they don't actually go hand in hand, if you will.
Ted, did you have another question for the group?
Oh, sorry about that. I do not. Thank you.
Okay. Is there anyone else who has questions for our speakers today? Go ahead, Michael.
Thanks, Karen. This is my last one. You guys touched on the resources when you're talking about the budget proposal, but just how do things stand after such a busy fall resource-wise? Do you guys feel like you have what you need in place to be ready for what could be a pretty busy spring?
Sure. Our biggest problem last year was everybody got tired. I mean, we were just wearing our folks out. So our folks are well rested. We'll see what comes this year. Depending on where fires are, a lot of them are just really labor intense, and it just requires a lot of, we demand a lot from our part-time staff. And like I said, hopefully they're well rested, and, they'll be ready to go if things happen.
Yeah, to that end, and Bill's touched on this, the chief's touched on this already, but we move staff around from region to region. The Forest Fire Service is broken up regionally, and so we'll shift those resources around depending upon the issues. There is a good cadre of part-time staff that come on board to support the full-time staff, so we can draw from that as well. And certainly if we had, major equipment needs or, some fundamental issues, that gets raised all the way up to the top, and we've never had a challenge addressing anything like that. I mean, we haven't had those issues, but that, we would tend to it if it came up.
Ted, I saw your hand come up after we talked a few moments ago. Do you have a follow-up? Okay.
I'm not sure why I did that. I'm sorry.
Okay, that's okay. Nikki?
Yeah, last two, and then I promise I'm done, and then probably everyone's done maybe. real quick, are you guys going to be putting any burn restrictions in place? I know obviously it's winter, but is that in talks right now? And then amongst all of you guys, you have dozens and dozens of years of experience with this. When was the last time you remember starting a year like this, and how did that year go?
Well, the burn restrictions, if we run into start to get the weather like we've had last weekend, yeah, I think we're going to see, every fire in New Jersey requires a permit one way or another, whether it's a farmer who agriculturally burns, a recreational fire that occurs in someone's backyard. And we thought about it, most of the campgrounds are all closed this time of year. We didn't have a whole lot of permits out. The farmers weren't burning because typically, again, things are wet and stuff like that. And they get these permits, if you will, on it's just like doing business. The permit expires, they just get another one, they sit on it. So we didn't have a whole lot of stuff going on that warranted needing to put anything on hold. Now, as the year goes on here and we start to see where we're giving out more of these permits and we need to be aware, then yes, if things continue to be dry and we start to have these conditions where we get windy days, low humidity, it might be just a day at a time, or if we continuously get dry like we did last year with no relief in sight, well then perhaps a hold on or a ban on the burning will carry on. But right now, as it stands, we just don't have enough permits out there that we're worried about it. But if in fact we start to issue some more permits as the weather changes and things continue as they are, yeah, we actually probably won't even issue the permits. We're going to wait and see. But right now, had we had a bunch of permits out on last weekend, they would have been put on hold. But that wasn't what our folks were faced with. Everybody's aware of all the permits we have out, and they can deal with it on more of a one-on-one basis. Like Farmer Smith calls and says, "Hey, I'm going to burn today," and the local fire warden will say, "Nah, I'd rather you didn't," and that's about as far as it goes. Because again, realistically, any burning that occurs in New Jersey is required to have a permit through our agency. So just something to keep aware of too. People shouldn't be burning unless they have a permit. And if they are burning, just be cognitive of what you're doing with them hot embers or those ashes when it's completed.
Any other questions? John, Greg, Bill, or Steve, anything else that any of you would like to add?
I think there was just a part two to Nikki's question about the start of the season, I think, Nikki, it was, and, our combined years of service here and experience in the realm. And so just to try to answer that from my perspective, I think what we are seeing and is the concept of wildfire not being a specific season anymore, but almost year round, right? So I think back to 2019, we had a large 10,000 acre wildfire that was March 26th. And we were closing out our traditional prescribed burning season around the middle of March, and then we went right into fire season. Go back a couple of years ago to 22 and 23, we started seeing large wildfires in February, right? And so here we are again at the end of February, beginning of March, and the fires are increasing in their frequency, in their intensity, in their size, in their locality, their geographic area that they're occurring. So I feel like, things are changing in terms of when fires are occurring, where they're occurring, how many are occurring. And, we're seeing that seasonality become more of a year-round fire season than just peak in April, May, maybe late March. And then we do typically would have as a secondary a fall fire season, but never one like we had in the fall of 2024.
That's great. Thanks, Greg. Well, appreciate all of you jumping on this afternoon and helping us to communicate with the public on how to be safe and prepared for wildfires and what we're experiencing. As Greg and the chief touched on, we're continuing to look at the New Jersey Wildfire Smart program and implementation of that. In these severe wildfire weather days, we're taking the most precautionary approaches. On days where the weather supports it, we're trying other preparedness measures like deployment of prescribed burning, where we're confident that we can stay in prescription and use that tool appropriately. So yeah, thank you all.
Thank you.
All
Thank you,
right,
everyone.
thanks.
Thanks all.
Thank you, guys.
All right, is there another meeting at 3 o'clock? Greg? Oh, he's
Take
going.
care.
Yeah, you don't waste time.
No.